What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Masters 2025. Super excited on the road traveling for work like normally, but we had to start kicking off the content for the summer, for the year with the first major. Um, Super excited, guys. I think this is going to be a great Masters. First off, just right off the hop, there was a little bit of rain earlier this week. Weather looks basically fine for the entire tournament. Looks like there might be some thunderstorms that are going to roll in Thursday after play has, kind of been wrapped up. Um, Smaller fields, there should be no guys finishing too late or anything like that. Um, we've got maybe some wind coming on Friday after that kind of cold front, blows through a little bit. That storm on Thursday night. Don't see it being that big of a deal. Going to be a little chilly in the morning on Saturday, maybe Sunday, like mid 40s, low 40s, something like that. But it's going to warm up pretty quick. So I think, we're not worried about anything crazy. Unfortunately, I think that does preclude some of those guys that, could win in a kind of a low grinder type of atmosphere. We saw it when Zach Johnson won at +1. Wild time. We also saw it with Danny Willett, winning in, the mid single digits. Um, I don't think it's going to be one of those outlier years. Sorry, I needed to wet the beak a little bit. So, getting right into it, just kind of an overview, right? Obviously, we have a lot of the live guys back. There's 12 live players playing. Um, there was 13 last year, so we've got Bryson, Rom, Brooks, Cam Smith, Dustin Johnson, Joaquin Neiman, Patrick Reed, Bubba Watson, Sergio, Tyrrell Hatton, Charles Schwartzel, and Phil Mickelson. So it's about 13% of the field. If you haven't paid attention really to live, and probably a lot of you have not, some notes, just, some particulars on those guys and how they've been playing. They played 5 events in 2025. Neiman has won 2 of them. Sergio has won one. Sergio's ball striking looks really, really good right now. Definitely an interesting thought that'll come up a little bit later. Rom has yet to finish outside the top 10 in any event this year. And Phil Mickelson, showing a little bit of form recently, has 2 top 10s in 4 starts. So, not bad. The live structure is a little bit different. They only play 3 rounds, but they do play on some pretty good courses. Doral last week was actually kind of enjoyable to watch. I had a pretty good time um, checking that out. So that's just a little bit to what we're talking about there. Obviously, Scotty, best player in the world. However, very difficult to go back to back here. Back to, past champions the next year have not fared extremely well. We've got some other top end players who haven't been playing great so far this year. Xander is one of them. Struggled it in the opener. Kapalua missed 8 weeks with a rib injury. He's played 3 times since returning. Hasn't been better than tied for 12th. Had a nice week at Valspar. Led all players with approach. He's rounding into some pretty decent form. I think he's a guy. I personally like Xander. I like his game for this course. Um, should be good. Um, Morikawa, JT, and Cantlay have been amazing at times to really good. Um, none of those 3 have a win since 2023. We've got Ludwig, obviously finished second last year. It's looked pretty good. Hideki, Hovland, they all have wins in 25, but outside of those wins, they have mostly looked pretty bad. We've got Rory. Can he complete the career Grand Slam? Right? He's won twice. Won the Players, been the best player in 2025 so far. No really disputing that. But can he get it done at Augusta? Um, It's one of those things where I don't know that Rory has ever looked more confident this year. Some of the, Rory things that we see out of him are kind of back. So really, really interesting. We have another past winner who just won, Angel Cabrera. Obviously, he won on the senior tour. Did a little time in the clink, was in jail in Argentina, I believe, somewhere in South America where he's from. Um, and then comes out and plays and wins. Side note, he was using the Odyssey Jailbird putter for that win on the senior tour. Pretty interesting. I think it's pretty fucking funny, to be honest with you. Um, there's the whole talk of the debutantes, right? So if we're talking from a betting perspective, a debutante, very few debutantes have ever won. The last one would be Fuzzy Zeller in 1979. Obviously, we have some second place finishes. Zalatoris finished second in his first Masters. Ludwig finished second last year. There's 21 players in the field this week that have never played a competitive round at Augusta, right? Not as many elite players, I would say. I would think that Aaron Rye is my personal favorite. I don't know that I'm betting Aaron Rye to win this week, but I definitely like Aaron Rye as a DFS play. That is for sure, right? Um, it's not really a secret that when we're looking at this week, past experience at this course gives you a gigantic edge, right? So with that in mind, that's kind of from a DFS perspective, that's kind of how I built my model. Um, I'm only looking at, I looked at form a little bit, just overall of how people are playing, but the model I filtered out and then I'm going to be using to build my player pool has rounds at Augusta factored into it. Um, and that's really the only one I'm looking at, right? Um, you know, there's a few guys in here that you, they could be playing very very poorly and then just kind of pop up and then play really well. Patrick Reed is one of them, right? Obviously, been playing on live. I don't know that he's ever in the past 5 years he hasn't finished outside of the top 20, right? And when you look at his price, very very fairly priced. So some people are just crossing off the live guys, right? Um, you know, some people are not, right? So, I don't think that crossing off the live guys from a DFS perspective is a very smart strategy. I bet Neiman to win. I think he's, very interesting, right? But, here's kind of what we're looking at. So, when we get into the DFS perspective, right? Um, Smaller field, okay, 96 players, top 50 in ties will make the cut. Um, so most of all of the good players outside of a few last year was Wyndham Clark who missed the cut, who everyone was kind of on. Um, Basically over 50% of the players are going to make the cut. So just because you get a 6 of 6 through this week does not guarantee that you are going to have a successful finish in whatever DFS contest you're playing, especially the larger the field that you decide to play, right? So keep that in mind when you guys are building your lineups. This is a very, very unique tournament. And if you haven't played DFS golf a lot before, it's one of those things where it's almost like you have to treat it like a no cut event, right? Obviously there is going to be a cut, but there's guys like Bernhard Longer, Angel Cabrera, the jailbird who I mentioned earlier, Freddie Couples, all these past champions. You've got the amateurs who were invited. There's a lot of guys who, could Bernhard Longer and Freddie Couples, you know, make the cut, right? I don't think Freddie's playing in it this year, but Longer is. Yeah, they definitely could because, like I said, over 50% of the field is going to make the cut, which is not a typical, you know, kind of situation that you're looking at. So, when we're talking about the model that I use, Moose and Pat's amazing product, fantasynational.com. You don't have to go into like, you don't have to overcomplicate things essentially, right? So the model that I put together this week, um, came into one, two, three, four, five, six, seven categories. Strokes gained or driving distance, strokes gained short game, strokes gained putting, bogey avoidance, DK points, playing on Draftkings, strokes gained around the green, and strokes gained approach. Okay. My highest weight was driving distance. I think that is, especially since some of the modification to the course was moving some of the tee boxes back, with there being no real, penalizing or penal rough aside from getting into the pine straw, maybe getting behind some trees and things like that. Driving distance does give you a significant leg up, in my opinion, on this field, right? Doesn't mean you have to, right? But if the winning score is going to be 12 under, 13 under, 14 under, somewhere in the teens, which is where I think it's going to land, you're probably going to have to drive the ball really well. You're probably going to have to drive it long to get it out there to be able to put yourself in a scoring position on some of these par fives and some of the longer par fours, right? So that way you don't have, a 240-yard approach iron that is going to be almost impossible to get to settle on these really, really firm greens, right? They've got the whole, I'll get my sub air system comment in there, right? So even though there is going to be a little bit of, it was rain earlier this week, it's going to rain Thursday night a little bit. It's really, really not going to matter a whole lot with the way that the course is set up. The greens are going to be firm, they're going to be fast, just how it is, right? And knowing how the greens react is really why we have to rely on that history and on that experience within um within the what am I trying to say here, with their experience on the course. Sorry. So I'm going to pull up my bets real quick and we'll just go through those, my outright bets, and some of the bets that I have made for the week. First bet that I made, pre-tournament, I guess, was Neiman, at 38-1 is what my book had. Kind of a weird number. I did add some more money on him. Excuse me. I had some more money on Neiman at 30-1. His number got chopped a little bit. But we'll go through it here. So I got Neiman, 40 and 30-1 are my two numbers on him. I've got Justin Thomas at 24-1. My book had some very interesting odds. My book always usually doesn't have sometimes the best odds either. Shane Lowry is somebody I actually really like at this course. I bet him at 35-1. Russell Henley, who's been kind of the talk of the town, really, really, really good caddy. But Henley's been playing well as well. Threw a dart on Henley at 50-1. And those are my lower bets. I did bet Patrick Cantlay, really like his form. Kind of talked about it earlier. Again, Shane Lowry, Sepp Straka, I got him in at 70-1. His number, I think the last time I checked, is down to 55-1 on my book. So definitely interesting there. Some longer odds. I did throw a small bet on Dustin at 80-1 to win. Some of these longer odd guys, I just kind of threw it out there. Sung J Im is another guy who usually plays pretty well here. Hasn't been playing great as of late. Threw a bet on him at 110-1. Cam Young, 150-1. Real dart throw there. Daniel Berger, who's really starting to round into form after that bad injury that really had him not playing very good golf for a long time. I was happy to bet him at 100-1. Just to see what happens. The only debutante that I bet was Bhatia at 70-1, and then I have Bobby McIntyre. Those are the straight outrights. We talked about Aaron Rai. He's a debutante. I bet him as a top English player, at 7-1. Thought that was a fun bet. And then I have a little top 30 parlay. So Matsuyama, Spieth, Sung J M, all to finish top 30, including ties. And I bet that at 5-1. So those are my outright bets. We'll get into the DraftKings now. So again, to run down the model: strokes gained approach, strokes gained around the green, DK points, bogey avoidance, strokes gained putting, strokes gained, short game, and driving distance were the Masters model that I came up with and I'm going to be going with. No shock, it's filtered out for Augusta National Golf Club. So all the last 24 rounds that everybody has played at Augusta National, uh, I'll give you, a few guesses who's going to finish at the top. It is Scotty Scheffler, ranking number one in all categories in strokes gained approach, around the green, DK points, second in bogey avoidance, 71st in putting, which is, he's losing. Um, about a tenth of a stroke around over his last 24 rounds at Augusta National. Sixth in strokes game, short game, and 14th in driving distance. So that's interesting. The second name that came up in my model, very interesting, Cameron Smith. Then we've got JT, Rom, Xander, Dustin, Hideki, Patrick Reed at 8, Rory 9, Kepka 10th, Spieth 11th, Morikawa 12th, Zalatoris 13th, Fleetwood 14th, Finau 15th, Cantlay 16th, Justin Rose, who I think is a pretty interesting play, especially on DraftKings this week, coming in at 17. Russell Henley 18th. His big detriment is, 83rd in driving distance, losing, about 4 strokes around at Augusta National in driving distance. Not great. So, he's probably going to be in my player pool. I don't know how heavily. Shane Lowry, and then rounding out the top 20 is going to be Phil Mickelson. Neiman came in just outside the top 20. This is only on Augusta. I think Neiman's been playing a lot better golf, so I'm not going to make the models like exact of like who I'm going to play based on this stuff, but I think that Joaquin Neiman is definitely going to be a play for me. When we talk about that. Going over to the ownership as we sit here on Tuesday night. Pretty interesting stuff. Colin Morikawa is coming in with the top ownership at just about 21%. Shane Lowry, 20%. Rory, 20%. Sepp, 18%. There's Russell Henley, very popular this week. Russell Henley, slightly higher owned than Scotty Scheffler, 18% versus 17.5%. Obviously, a very large price difference between those two. Zalatoris, 17. Bobby Mack, 16, Patrick Reed, 16, Connors, 16, JT, 15, Rom, 14, which I think, I'll have a lot of Rom if he continues to stay at that ownership price. Cameron Smith, 13%. Then Xander, who I kind of talked about earlier, who's starting to round into form a little bit, but only looking at about 11 to 12% owned, which is the same ownership as JJ Spawn. Again, pricing, I get it. Daniel Berger, who I like this week, only at 12%. Minwoo Lee, who's an interesting guy who I starred. Doesn't have a whole lot of rounds at Augusta, so he's not going to pop up there. But obviously, with the win, playing pretty well, drives the ball pretty well. My concern with him is making a big number. The guy who everybody is kind of talking about, some of the live guys, Brooks and Bryson are hovering around 10% right now. Sergio, 9%. Really, really like Sergio this week. He's been playing pretty phenomenally. Doesn't pop up in the model as far as the master rankings go, but again, that's not the end all be all for me. Sergio Garcia is definitely going to be in my player pool this week at $7,100. You can't ignore the type of ball striking that he's having right now. Playing really, really well. um, you know, it's just one of those things where I'm not going to discount him. Michael Kim, who's been playing some really good golf, 9%. Justin Rose, 8%. Batia, who I really do like quite a bit, lefty, has a good shot shape for this course, 8%. Ludwig, only 8%. I'm going to be playing Ludwig this week, especially quite a bit if he stays at that 8%. He has not been playing, consistently very good. He does have a win. But at that kind of ownership, again, a lot of people are going to get 6 of 6 through. Ownership is going to matter, right? And if you have some of these lower owned, high quality players that we think can contend, and obviously Ludwig can certainly contend, he's going to be up there. Sung J M, who I just personally like quite a bit this week, he's $7,300, really fair price, coming in at only 4% own. Tony Finau, 4%, hasn't been playing very well. Dustin Johnson, 7,500, has been playing much better as of late on live. So I'm going to take a stab at him at 3% ownership. And that's kind of it. So yeah, so we do have Freddie Couples. Like, here's some of these guys that I'm talking about, right? Angel Cabrera, Hiroshi Tai, Vijay Singh, Bernard Longer, Mike Weir, Olafable, Couples, Noah Kent, Evan Beck. These guys are just pure cross offs for me, right? So you can kind of shrink your player pool that way. Zach Johnson, Thurston Lawrence is going to be a pass for me. Um, I think that about 6,700 is going to be my floor. Guys like Michael Kim. And I think I had one more person at around that 6,000 range. That's probably going to be the lowest I think I'm going to go. And then you can get some really good builds from that as well. Okay. So going back to look at a few things. So if you take off the Augusta National filter, right, we just talked about the model, and go back to just, who's playing well right now and redo that model. The last 24, rounds that we have recorded with data, Bryson does come up number one, Minwoo Lee number two, Rory three, JT four, Cam Smith five, Morikawa six, Scotty seventh, Brooks eighth, Berger ninth, Steven Yeager 10th. Okay. Michael Kim number 11, Hatton, Lowry, Henley, Spawn, Cantlay, and we are going to round it out with Spieth, Neiman, Reed, and Danny McCarthy, who I will not be playing. Um, so yeah, a really interesting week. Just looking at some of the builds that I have done already. Um, I kind of like to build, especially for the Masters, in a couple of different, aspects, I guess. It is I like to build a couple of lineups really early, kind of before I do any research, of just, kind of how I'm feeling. Go from there of guys who, I'm looking at, feeling good about, right? So one lineup I really like that I built so far was Rom, Cam Smith, Minwoo Lee, Tony Finau, Will Zalatoris, and Aaron Rai. You know, not definitely some good ownership numbers on those guys. I built that before the ownership stuff kind of came out. I don't really look at ownership. Today is really the first day that I've looked at it. I'm going to look at it more tomorrow, obviously, right? I'm playing a total of, let's see here, 9, 10, 11. I'll be playing in about 11 different lineups. I might add one or two if I see another um, contest pop up that I like. I usually try and stick around the $44 Club Twirl. Is going to be the largest contest that I am playing for number of entries wise, at about 6,600 entries. I don't really like to play line. That's even a little bit on the high side for me. Don't really like to play in tournaments any more than that. I'm not going to be max entering that, but I will be entering, some contests in there. Some other contests I like are the $20 three max. That's still got, it's about half full right now. Really like the payout structure for that one. Both of the $33 single entries, really nice tournaments. The larger one obviously has a nice $25,000 prize to first, 5,300 entries. But I like the 50K dog leg too, right? Only 1,700 people playing in that. All good. One other thing right now, that if you do deposit, Draftkings has a promo where you can get a free entry into the $10 Millionaire Maker. That's not you know, that's not a tournament that I typically play, but if DraftKings is going to give me, free entry, I'm definitely going to do that. I'm only building on DraftKings. I don't play on FanDuel, so all this information is going to be geared toward, my thoughts on DraftKings, with pricing and ownership and things like that. It's just what I like to focus on a little bit more. Um, so let's go back to one other thing here. So my absolute favorite plays this week, especially when you factor in things like ownership. Um, I really think that Justin Thomas is going to be one of my guys that I'm really into this week. Same with John Rahm from the more expensive guys, 96 and 10-4 respectively. Um, both coming in at only about 15%. Really, really like that. I'm going to take a few shots at Xander. Um, but he's going to be I'll probably be under the field on him. I'll probably have about 8% Xander, and he's coming in at about 13% right now. Really like Burger, or we'll kind of go by salary here. So let's filter that so we're not kind of jumping all over the place. Rory, I'm going to be underweight to the field. Ludwig, I will probably be in the somewhere like around 10 to 11% range, especially if he stays at sub 10% ownership. That's something I'm just going to bet on the talent of Ludwig. Um, to come in second, look like how he did last year in his first you know tournament in the Masters, I think is pretty damn impressive. So yeah, that's a guy in the nines. Like I said, JT in the high nines. Obviously, I really like Neiman again, sub 10% ownership. I'm gonna jump on that. Spieth is, I think, a little bit too overpriced, and that probably has to do obviously with his history around here. He might find my way into one or two lineups, but I'm going to be underweight to the field on Spieth. That's for sure. I think Minwoo, he started off the year not very, not didn't just wasn't great, right? It's gotten a lot better. Obviously with the win, things like that. I think Will Zalatoris is a solid play, but his ownership is gonna have me tempering my thoughts on him a little bit. Love Akshay and Bobby Mack, right there at the bottom of the eights. Um, Probably, Batia, obviously, debutante here, but 8%. I think that's something that you just really can't ignore. I really think Finau is a nice play at 4%. He hasn't been playing the best this year, but this is kind of one of those tournaments where guys can just kind of come out of nowhere, right? Um, Sep, obviously, getting really steamed up, 7,600. Numbers look really good. I think he should definitely be priced higher, and that's really why he's garnering quite a bit of ownership. He might be one of the guys I'm just willing to eat the chalk on, to be quite honest with you. Sung J M, again, I already talked about in the low sevens here. He's a guy I really like at 4% ownership. Justin Rose at 8% is another guy in the low sevens that I'm kind of gravitating towards more and more. Daniel Berger gaining quite a bit of ownership, for where he's at 7,100. And then, like I said, into the sixes, it's really just for me right now. I've got Aaron Rye at 6,800 and then Michael Kim. I might play some Phil at 6,700, but that's about it. I do not think, in how I'm looking at building, I don't think that I need to go any lower than this. You've got poor Max Homa down here. Now, Max Homa is a guy that, like, that 1 milli maker lineup, Max Homa, 6,500 at 1%, or somebody like Nick Taylor doesn't have form, you know, has been playing very poorly. Um, I think is something that's interesting. Another debutante that I might pair like two of these cheap guys in that milli maker would be Nicholas Echeverria at 6,400. But again, that's just going to be for that milli maker type play. Those aren't guys that are going to really find my way into a lot of the lineups, right? So like I said, I built about 25% of my lineups. Going to build some more tonight, finish up tomorrow night, and really just be ready for the Masters. Again, really appreciate you guys listening. Follow along with me on Twitter at JJ McIntosh. Yes, I'm still calling it Twitter. I think that's just what it will always be to me. So follow along there at JJ McIntosh at Red Zone Sports. We really appreciate you guys, listening. If you're listening on podcast, make sure to please rate, review 5 stars. It really helps us out. We just do this for fun, but to get to more people listening and more exposure, why not? And then on YouTube, like, comment, who you think is going to be the winner, who you've bet on, or maybe your favorite DraftKings play. So that's all I got for tonight, guys. Happy hunting, and let's have a fantastic week and enjoy the Masters.